Fight.
Welcome back to the Two Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett. This is a new edition of Draft Chat. Here joined today by Darian Thomas. We'll get to him in just a second. Looking forward to we're going to talk about the Hornets today. Obviously, Josh is no longer here to talk about the Hornets, so I've got to still make sure I get my Hornets love out there. But very peculiar position for them, obviously, being a potential top 4 team in the lottery as we're recording this on Thursday, February 2nd. You won't hear this until the following Friday, whatever date that is. I don't have it in front of me. Being very clear about that. If something happens or time-sensitive changes, we will disclaimer, it's on the screen right now. You're hearing it, etc. Don't forget to check out 2pointers, wenergy.com. Link in the description below for 10% off your first order. All right, let's talk to Darian here. I haven't had him on since, I believe it was Trivia Showdown, which was months ago in the summertime. First of all, before we get started, obviously, for those that don't know, obviously you do Trust the Buzz, which is your YouTube channel, as well as now the thing that caught my interest, of course, knowing that you do like this stuff, is Draft Nerds, which is obviously why we're here. We want to talk about it. Tie all your things together. Before you introduce yourself, I just want you to be clear. This is also just a wellness check. I know the tweets concern me. You seem like you're not in a good place with the Hornets. So honestly, for those that don't know, if you want to follow, everything for him will be on the screen as well as below. Please follow Darian. Please keep him in your thoughts and prayers with how the Hornets are acting right now. But hopefully, we're here to talk about the future and the things that will be better based on some guys that you like in those positions. So enough of my talking. First of all, how are you? Introduce yourself to my listeners that might not know who you are.
Oh, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. My name is Darian. I run Trust the Buzz, as Trevor mentioned, and then also I do Draft Nerds. I randomly started that channel just because, actually, with the Hornets being bad my entire life, I really got into the draft. Growing up in North Carolina, of course, college basketball is everything. So I was like, hey, I'll do a draft channel. I know a lot of things about the draft, and I noticed that a lot of people, I guess, in the space I kind of work in, which is YouTube, typically don't know about the draft. Like they'll say it. They're like, hey, I don't watch college basketball. And I'm like, as someone who watches a lot of college basketball, let me go ahead and share my thoughts. So I started that, and then also I just complain a lot on Twitter about the Hornets. So so that's about it. That's about it from me.
I love it. That's the exciting part about what we're talking about is you're kind of bridging the old with the new here. It's like, okay, we're tired of this 15-37 team with a unfortunate .288 winning percentage. That's not the point. What's really neat is we're going to simulate in just a second for those that are not familiar with the title or the format or how mock drafts work. We're not doing a full mock, unfortunately. We're just doing the 5 picks that the Charlotte Hornets have. In just a minute, I'm going to simulate the Tankathon. You can do it once per day. You can do it as many times as you want, whatever it is. You can simulate it and see what they get. They currently have a projected top 4 pick. They also have the 29th pick from Denver, the 46th pick from Utah, the 49th pick from Dallas, and the 52nd pick from Miami. So got a lot of good things to talk about. We'll basically get the chance to talk about, obviously, one of the top 4 prospects at some point. And I kind of want to go through like where they would have fallen if they don't get it, just to make sure that I can't go 6 months in this draft cycle and not talk about Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson. I feel like I just haven't talked about them because I don't feel like I need to. We'll talk about that. So obviously 4, 29, 46, 49, and 52. The obvious is you're hoping for 1, I'm assuming. Yes, before I hit this button.
Hoping for 1, for sure. Okay.
Well, for those that don't know, Tankathon.com, for the fun of this, kicking this episode off, getting started, I am going to go ahead and hit Sim Lottery, and that's what we're going to talk about. Right now, obviously, it has Detroit, Houston, San Antonio, and Charlotte locked together there at the top 4, just outside Orlando, Toronto. It would be Chicago's pick going to Orlando, Indiana, LA going to New Orleans, and then Oklahoma City at 10, Washington at 11, Portland at 12, New Orleans to Lakers again at 13, and then 14. So there are your at Utah. So there are your lottery teams. We're going to sim and see what happens. Tankathon, I love how they added the little spin wheel graphic.
Yeah, I like that. I like that feature.
All right. So
that doesn't sound good.
It's not bad. It's not bad. It's not what I wanted for content's sake, but I'm going to read it from 14-1. It'll be quick. Utah stayed at 14. New Orleans, Los Angeles pick 13. Portland is 12. Washington 11. Oklahoma City 10. Lakers Pelicans pick at 9, and this is where things change. Chicago fell 1 spot or Chicago Orlando fell to 8. Toronto fell 1 to 7. Orlando fell 1 to 6. So a lot of changing that sounds good to you.
Yeah.
Except for when you realize San Antonio fell 2 spots to 5, so they were the 5 fall in there. And then, unfortunately, Indiana went up 5 places.
Of course.
And Charlotte fell at the 4th pick. Indiana got the 3rd pick, 5 spots ahead. Houston at 2, and Detroit at 1. So, processing that, if that is what happens April something draft lottery wise, what would be your initial reaction?
I'll be upset. It's very Charlotte Hornets-esque to not get in there. I mean, I will say that we did have a good jump with LaMelo. We weren't supposed to get LaMelo. We weren't supposed to get a 3rd pick overall, and nor were we supposed to get LaMelo because everybody thought that for sure someone would, LaMelo was going to go 2nd, and he ended up not. So that was probably our good luck. And to be honest, since I've been a Charlotte Hornets fan my whole life, that's probably where it ends. It's probably going to be another 10 years where we get something to go our way, especially in the draft.
Thunder fans thought the same way, and then that was like I saw all these videos from watch parties in OKC last year when they got 2, and it was just nuts to see. Just to kind of like buy in. Obviously their strategy is a lot different,
Right.
But understood that however it happens, let's jump into this because obviously Victor Wembanyama. I don't think Detroit, for the sake of, regardless of who cares about the logjam at guard, it doesn't matter to me. Scoot Henderson would probably not be the number 1 overall pick, especially to Detroit. Houston, whatever, right? We're just going to assume that those 2 go. Let's just make this fun. At that point, and I'm so sick of this every year. It's the draft starts after 2 or 3. Yeah, it's like, oh my God, I'm sick of hearing it. Well, this year it really does mean that, unfortunately. So Indiana, I don't want to sit here and say like Indiana, let's just say Indiana takes this person. But for the fun of what I told you before we started, in case you wanted to keep my big board handy, we're going to assume that they take Cam Whitmore because I want to make it consistent and easy, right? That's who I have at 3. That's who I've had at 3 most of this process so far. That is of February 1st. This is kind of an informal. My big board will have been out 2 weeks at that point when people hear this for transparency. But regardless, Cam Whitmore is going to go number 3. After that, you've got a plethora of choices here. You are Mitch Kupchak. Who are you taking at number 4 right here? And then let's discuss
I'm looking. Oh, man. So one thing you would have to think about is this is where you start building around LaMelo because I know that sounds crazy, but if you look at a lot of the transactions, even what they've done in the draft, nothing has been to complement specifically LaMelo. It's been how can we make this team better, and it just so happened it hasn't worked out. But like drafting James Bouknight, that wasn't a good complementary piece to LaMelo outside of even before what's going on now. Kai Jones was kind of a fit, but still, what Kai Jones did, he was so raw that still wasn't a good fit. Mark Williams. I love Mark Williams. He's been playing very well. I loved him coming out of Duke. At the time, I thought he was a better prospect than Jalen Duren. Still kind of do. I think it's just more so he's just not playing. But Jalen Duren was a better fit because the way he runs the floor, he's that big body center that's very extremely athletic. Not saying Mark Williams isn't, but Jalen Duren was more so like the lob type, and we know that's what LaMelo goes for. And then Bryce McCowens, that was actually a good fit to me. For to be next to LaMelo. He was supposed to be a 1st-round pick. I'm glad they got him in the 2nd round. Saying all that, like I said, this is where you have to build around LaMelo, and I say you get him some shooting. This team has not had a true shooter at all, in my opinion. They've had people that can shoot, but there's a difference between a shooter and someone that can shoot. And I think this is where you personally have to get Brandon Miller. I think I'm going with Brandon Miller right here. Now you could ask, like, okay, what about Jalen McDaniels? What about PJ Washington? Because they're not the same player, but they play the same position, kind of in that weird, like, I wouldn't say necessarily a wing, but also not a big man. So it's like that weird kind of space. But you just have to. He's a terrific scorer. We don't have many scorers. Like Terry Rozier is a scorer, but he's more of a, I guess what I would say, he's more of a streaky guy. He can get to the basket, he can catch and shoot, but he's still a little streaky. Brandon Miller is a guy who, no matter where you put him, one thing he's going to do is score. And I know a lot of people have been talking about his defense, but his defense actually isn't that bad. I think that a lot of it is that he is a freshman and he's a very talented freshman, and that kind of shows when freshmen are more so just trying to get in and get out. That I feel like that's kind of where he's at. The team just so happens to be good, so that works out. But you have to go Brandon Miller here. I'm not worried about his defense at all. I know that the team as a whole needs more defense, but you can't. I was really stuck maybe going between Amin Thompson or Sawyer Thompson, but they need the ball too much. And that's not, I mean, that's how they play. They've got to where they are because of how they play. Not knocking them for that, but you need someone that can catch and shoot. And Brandon Miller can do that, but he also can take over when LaMelo can't get the ball, when he starts getting denied the ball, or it's just the play's not for him. The Charlotte Hornets don't have anybody that can really go get it themselves. I mean, without chucking up shots. Terry Rozier can, but he kind of reverts back to shot chucking. So does Kelly Oubre. And also these guys might not even be here for that long. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but I'm trying to cover all my bases so no one's like, why would he? I'm going Brandon Miller. Just simply for the reason that he can shoot, but also, I mean, he's a pretty good rebounder. The team doesn't still have that center, even though Mark Williams, I love him, but they still don't have that center. They still don't have that guy to get all the boards. So they still do a lot of team rebounding. So he can do that because PJ and Jalen McDaniels don't rebound that well, considering they're like the power forward. So you got Brandon Miller. I'm not saying he's this world amazing Dennis Rodman on the boards, but he does get boards from that power forward position. So that's what I have to go with. He can spot up. He can create his own shot. I know people kind of get on to him because of they say he can't create his own shot, but he can. I've seen it enough to where I'm not mad at it. So that's what I would take it for.
I like it. I was so glad you did it. And I actually really thought that's what you were probably going to do. So don't worry. Long-winded or not, I love it. I think that's great context. It's good information on Brandon Miller. I'm not – let me not say this. Let me say it like this. I was going to hold your feet to the fire regardless whether you said Brandon Miller or not. So you mentioned team fit. I think all of that stuff was great. It's all things that are really important, and people I think people who think about the draft from a – you just always got to take the best player available mentality, which sometimes is okay. But I also think I'm with you. I think at this point you have to build around either not just necessarily team fit, because some teams do need to draft by team fit. But in your case, it's a great point. Draft around your best player, which is it's similar to team fit, but you're drafting about how you can build for LaMelo, right? So that's why it's really hard for like a guy like Trae Young. It's like, how can you draft and build your team around a guy? You have to change your whole mentality if that's your best player. LaMelo's a little bit. You can like, especially the way this 3-point shooting's been this year. You can figure that out, right? Like he is a piece that is flexible. However, what I'm gonna hold you to, or what I want to talk about, kind of create that dialogue. I like you brought up Amen and Nassar. The one guy you didn't bring up, because obviously Cam Whitmore's off the board. Whatever. I imagine athletic slasher that has a really good upside.
I really like Cam Whitmore.
I know, and that was why I wanted to just pluck him off and just make it interesting and basically force you to really start the draft, right? And I'm actually really glad they got 4, and here's why. Jarris Walker doesn't need the ball. And I want to talk about why Jarris Walker wouldn't be, a guy in that similar position. Brandon Miller is obviously going to be, I have their current age on my big board. A little bit easier for me to kind of keep up with it than their draft age. But Jarris Walker is 19. He will be 19 when the season starts, so nothing big there. Not that, I'm not an ageist by any means, but Brandon Miller just turned 20, so they're in that same range. Why not Jarris Walker at 4?
Jarris Walker, I really wanted to have him at 4. 1, I think that's just a little too high. 2, he still needs some help figuring out what he really does. He's good at a lot of things, but not great at one thing. He also needs help. I say help, but it's just development. He's young. He just needs a little more development in certain areas, and it's not really a knock on him. It's more so, I sound really negative, but it's more so a knock on the Hornets. I have no faith whatsoever in them taking a player that just needs that extra bump to figure out what he does. Like Brandon Miller, he knows he wants to be a scorer. That there's no doubt in his mind. That's what he does. That's what he's good at. Jarris Walker, I wouldn't be surprised if you tell me that this guy ends up being. I'm trying to, because it's really hard to compare players because everybody's like, what? I don't see it. But I wouldn't be surprised he's just a multi-tool guy where, let's just use Scotty Barnes for an example, because that's the most, I think, off the top of my head. If he's just a Scotty Barnes type player where he does a little bit of everything very well, but nothing elite, I wouldn't be surprised. And I mean, he will have a very successful career. I 100% believe that. I love what I see from him at Houston. It's just that it does take a little refinement. It does also, part of it is that he can't, as of right now, he can't be your second best player. And right now, I feel like the Hornets have to go for their second best player. If you see a guy that can possibly be a second best player, this is the jump you take. Now, if they were like, let's say, let's just say Orlando, even though he wouldn't fit there, but let's just say Orlando. If they was Orlando, it would be a little different because they have so many pieces around him that would really help him shine. Hornets don't have that. It's LaMelo, and that's honestly it. You can say Bryce McGowan's if you want, and we're talking future sake here because you could still have Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward and things, but it's just he's just a really good complementary piece where when it's time to pay him, when that time comes for him, he's going to get paid. Teams are going to want him, but teams are also going to know that's not your first or second best player. Maybe not even talent wise your third, but he's that guy where if you don't have him on your team, you're going to struggle. You're gonna be missing that piece. So that's kind of what I get from him. I could be very wrong because, like I said, he right now shows that he can do a lot. So eventually, he may could just take off and just be an excellent scorer or just an excellent defender. So as of right now, though, he seems like just a multi-tool guy, and the Hornets really desperately need someone that can just come in and just hopefully be at least the second best player. Because there's no room for it as far as just what they've done in the past.
They're in a position to swing for the fences, which is why I don't disagree with the pick like Amen or Asar or even Brandon Miller. Yes, I am not the highest on him, and I'll explain it because I wanted to be clear why I brought up Jarace Walker. I don't think any team, like you made a perfect point. Like even the Hornets, any team can use Jarace Walker. That's the best part about it. He's so versatile, athletic, switcher. Offensively, I'm still trying to figure out some things, but I have him at 4, and I think that's valuable because I think what he brings NBA-wise, and I think that's the beauty of philosophy. I think people need to realize, like, you're not always going to get – there's people all the time in the draft community that you're not always going to get and I can't sit here and pull my every draft class ever out of my butt and be like, this is a guy someone drafted at 4, and he turned out to be a 13-year NBA pro but was never an all-star. It's like – sometimes that's more valuable, right? Now, is it more valuable to the Hornets? That's a great point. I think Brandon Miller is going to provide things, but the difference for me and why I think, and I do like them as similar players, I think in that range, Amen and Asar are both those, 6'7" guard / wings. Keontae George, 6'4" guard / wing, depending on the height. And then for me, it's, okay, Brandon Miller is only an inch taller than Jarace Walker. They offer me similar things offensively. However, I do like when Jarace Walker doesn't need the ball, he's going to impact in other ways, right? Being more 100%. Active, setting more screens, moving without the ball better. I just overall, I think that's where I have to draw my NBA value line. I have a tier in my ranking, my spreadsheet that says NBA ability or role, where if none of the glaring weakness and glaring strengths mattered, what are they absolutely going to be for me, whether it be this year when they get drafted or for the next 15 years in the NBA. And Jarace Walker's defensive disruptor was the first thing that came to my mind, and that's what I put down, which I think is really, really important. And it's not necessarily taken away from what the Hornets need. It's just being clear that he's going to fit anywhere, and I think he would be unbelievable there. And I am a believer in the shot coming around. I don't want people to sit here and overreact to the fact that I have Brandon Miller 8. That is a lot higher than he was on version 1 a month ago, okay? Being completely clear with you. He was,
8
it's low. It's low.
It's low.
January 1, January was right when he started really taking off. So January 1, I had him in I think he was 15 or 14. So lottery, right? Still lottery. Right. Let's not overreact.
And also, you got to keep in mind this is a very talented draft class. So
it is exactly. So taking that consideration, I want people to understand that I am not knocking Brandon Miller, but I'm knocking the fact that Jarace Walker does more for me when he doesn't have the ball. And if LaMelo, who's not a historically high usage player, but he's going to have the ball in his hands on bad teams. That is what it is. You want a guy that's going to be impactful in a lot of different ways. And obviously, I think there's a culture thing but Jarace Walker's just going to be a great culture fit and be the defender, the guy that always does the dirty work. And I think that's valuable, and I think that he would be valuable there, which, by the way, I'm agreeing with you. Brandon Miller, if he's available at 4, whether I think he's 8 or 12 or 40, I think he's the best pick. I just want to be clear. I'm glad you said it, but I wanted to have the dialogue about Jarace Walker. Amen. Jarace Walker is kind of the other one, obviously.
Yeah, Jarace Walker definitely deserves some. A lot of people, it's really weird. A lot of people, especially with college basketball, if someone isn't just this, I don't know, they take over the team type player in college, people assume they're not going to be good in the pros, or they're not going to be worth a top pick. And it's just one thing you got to understand about college basketball is a lot of these offenses and a lot of the ways these teams play, they've been doing that for 10, 15 years. That's just how they do it. So, and the example I love to use, and it might be overused, but it's so true. Look at Kentucky. If you look at a lot of players that came out of Kentucky, I remember was it Isaiah Briscoe, who was really decent at Kentucky, and then never heard from him again. So, but then you have guys like Devin Booker came off the bench. So
Never
then it's
started
just
a
like
single game in college. My favorite fact in
exactly,
the
and
NBA.
then he ended up being obviously amazing. So in college basketball, to a detriment almost, a lot of coaches don't use their player to the full extent, but there's a lot of different nuances in college when you're coaching too. So that's something you got to think about. But yeah, a guy, just because he doesn't put up amazing stats doesn't mean he's not going to be good. And so I'm glad you brought up Jarace Walker, because I do feel like he's going to be really good. Or in another quick example, Florida State, just in general, they're none of the guys they've produced did much in college. But then you got Jonathan Isaac, who was really good before he got injured. Scotty Barnes, I think Patrick Williams went there, who he's still coming along, but he's showing flashes. So it's just, you got to look at college in a different light. And I think a lot of times people are so used to watching the NBA that when they look at college, they're like, oh, well, he's not taking over. And you get what you get, you know? So I mean, Zion struggled against, what was it, Bowl against UCF. I mean, okay, struggled for Zion. I will say that's a different case, but struggled for Zion. And obviously Zion's amazing. And Bowl is not even in the league. Not Bowl. What's his name? Taco Fall. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. Taco Fall. And Taco Fall's not even in the league. So these are just different things you got to think about. So Jarace Walker is more so the Hornets than him, to be honest. Now, if this was last year's team, 100%, I'm probably going someone with that could do a little more. But considering this is not last year's team, and the future is really up in the air right now, I have to go with someone that I know that can score and just can be a reliable player.
So answer me this before I transition out of college for a second. If Cam Whitmore was available at 4 in this situation, would you absolutely be taking him no matter what?
For sure. I'm 100% taking Cam Whitmore.
Good. I'm with you.
I feel like he's a good mixture.
That's why I plucked him. Exactly, he is. That's why I plucked him. I was like, look, let's make this easy. Let's get the guy that I had a feeling I've seen some of your stuff. I think you like the guy more than most, and I'm with you at 3. The part I want to finish the 4th pick with is, and then we can hit the 29, 40s of the world, obviously, because I think those guys are important. Amen or Asar? Is that an easy answer for you, or why? Like, let's just talk about the Thompson twins for a second, anyway. Regardless of what question.
I loved him. The thing is, just I don't know. LaMelo's in this weird spot where he can play without. Like this year, he's showing he can play without the ball a lot. But then it's just like I don't know how well they could play without the ball, because obviously they play with the ball all the time. And I've seen flashes, especially Amen. Like he's really a really good slasher. But it's just weird. It's more so. It's just I had to go with to me what feels like a more of a sure thing. But yeah, I love them both. And I think I would say Asar's better. Asar, really? I think he's better because he's shown more progression in his game. And I mean, he's still really good. And I'm not saying he's a stick in the mud, but I think Asar has shown that just every time you see him, he's better. He's doing something new. He's doing something different. And that to me it's more of a projection thing, but also he can shoot a little better too. And that's something you got to think about. And the thing is, their numbers are horrible shooting, but it's not like you look at their shot and it's like, oh, that's broken. Or, I mean, a lot of times it just doesn't go in.
It's going to take some time. The point I like to make with them, and I haven't talked about them a lot publicly, at least on Draft Chat, but the point I want to make with them that I think people are, and I'm not an ageist, I want to be clear by any means, they just turned 20, literally just turned 20 on the 30th of January. So they're on the other side of 19, right? So that's something you got to think about when you join the NBA, and you're 19 is like the perfect number because you're just old enough. You played that 1 year in college, whatever, at least for me. But, if you are giving this is more for Amen more than anything. If you are not giving him the ball, which if LaMelo's on your team, you're not giving Amen the ball. I'm just going to say it. It is what it is. Now, other teams, whatever. But if you're giving Amen the ball, then you know what you want out of him. If you're not giving him the ball is where, and that's why I agree with you on the Asar strides, is I think Asar would maybe fit a little bit better, and I can see how things are coming around. Like I said, I'm not in love with either of their jump shots by any means, but what I am in love with is how they can impact the game, even though I don't think we're going to get to see that if they're on the Hornets, because I think you're just going to hand LaMelo the ball, and they're going to be almost an auxiliary playmaker at that point, or an auxiliary scorer, or whatever. And it's not a knock to them or the play style of the team. It's I wish that, like, if these guys were standouts in every capacity and whatever, right? Obviously, they'd be number 1, number 2 picks here. But the point is there are reasons that they are not the 3rd, 4th, 5th potential best player in this class, which is why I'm kind of not a believer in Amen's jump shot. I am a believer in Osar's. I know that's a huge thing to say out loud already, but I think there's some things that are there mechanically for either of them. So I guess my point is coming together here is I don't know if that is the perfect fit for them. And I don't think it's the perfect fit for the Hornets either because of the impact it would have on the next 4 years of your development.
For sure. And for them specifically, them two specifically, I feel like whatever team they go to, they need a little more freedom. And the Hornets are really bad at giving young players freedom. They're hard enough to get on the floor, young players, because I always knock the Hornets for one thing is like they're really big on, hey, you have to earn this position, right? But one thing I think I said in my latest video is you're drafting players who have never seen the Hornets be decent. Like they maybe once, I think, yeah. So like what, 2000, whatever year that was when they played the Heat. I'm not good at trivia, as most people probably already know. But that year was probably the only year they've been decent. So you're drafting players who have never seen this team decent. So imagine being a young player, you're getting drafted to this team, you're probably better, more than a lot of the guys on the roster. And they're like, hey, you have to earn this spot over. I mean, I love Jalen McDaniels, but Jalen McDaniels or Cody Martin, you're like, why? Why would I need to prove myself over Cody Martin? And I know it's like to build culture, but it's like at one point, if you're the Hornets, you got to self-reflect and be like, hey, we need to put people on the court and just see what they can do. So players like the Twins, it just wouldn't fit just because I feel like they do need that freedom. I know like Benedict Mathurin, like if he started, I don't think he would be what he is because what works for him is that he gets to come off the bench and Rick Carl's like, do whatever you want. And I promise you, like, it'll be okay. And it also helps that he's a really amazing player. But I feel like if he was a starter, it wouldn't work out as well as it has. The fact that he's had that freedom to come off the bench and just really show what he can do, that's helped him. I feel like the Twins are in that position. I also feel like Keontae George is in that position too. I know we haven't talked about him, but I think he's another one where you have to get the keys. And so with starting next to LaMelo, not going to work. Also, this might be a hot take. I'm also not a big fan of overtime elite. That's one thing that also holds me back is, so at first I was like, oh, it's just another league. And so, where players can play fine. But then I've watched a lot of games and I'm like, no, they're really good, but it makes it worse considering no one else is doing what they're even close to what they're doing a majority of the time when they're playing other teams. So I give them a slight knock for that, but you can tell that they're talented. It's not like one of those situations where you're watching them play and then it's just like, oh, they're just playing against some guys. I'm just not the biggest fan. You can tell they're talented, but I would rather see them have went to college or even the G League. But yeah, that's my little thing about overtime elite. I don't really like it that much, to be honest with you.
I will say separating production value aside, because I'm with you. Watching those games, I want to watch them on mute and honestly watch them with one eye sometimes. But setting that aside, I will say from talking to people, and that's one thing I'm a lot more keen now on and trying to be, especially with this uncertainty we have. I wasn't high on the G League when it first kind of started being important to the developmental process. And now I'm completely back around on that, to be clear. But I will say from people that I know that I have not been there yet, I am hopefully, fingers crossed, next year we'll be working on some stuff with them. So we'll see what happens. But regardless, I am really looking forward to seeing how it happens and develops with them. I do believe in Kevin Ollie, the head of the coaching and development there.
Yeah.
Obviously a national champion at UConn, so a lot of, as a coach. But the point I want to make is I'm with you. I was there for the whole experience. Like I just was like, I'm out. Like this is not for me. Especially last year with how it went with Barlow. And whoever the other guy was that didn't get drafted now. He's leaving me now. But regardless, I have talked to people that have been there. I trust their opinion, and they said that seeing it in person and seeing how these guys are developed as professionals, as men, honestly, and just understanding of basketball on and off the floor, I'm starting to be a little bit more in. Now, obviously, it's a huge change because they're going from two guys that were probably already fringe seconds anyway last year to two guys that have talent that should be top 10 picks. Big difference, right? I'd like to see it next year, and then the year after. You're Rob Dillinghams of the world. I don't want to jump into 24 too early. But it's a great like segue to be like, okay, yeah, he's probably gonna be considered a top 10 pick, but maybe not, because next year's class is really, really talented. So we're going to see where he kind of falls in that range. And I think I hate to say it, the chapter's not written yet, but I'm with you. I think I have my reservations, and I hope that I get to a point where I do like it even more. Obviously, if we see these two guys succeed, then we'll have some way to tie it back to their development.
For
but
sure.
obviously, they've been in that system for a year now, or 2 full years now, technically. I don't know. It's I think the single-handedly one of the reasons that high school basketball hasn't been the next path for people, because I think we're seeing that there are good alternatives, and I hope that they end up being one of them.
Right. And I think it's a great idea for sure. Like it's definitely a great idea, but like you said, the production makes it hard to watch. And then it's just on top of that, you're really watching at this point for two guys, and then maybe some other guys will catch your eye. But it's just weird, I guess is the best way to put it, is that because it's obvious that they're talented. It's just more so I would like to see them being just more meaningful, but I guess it will gain that as they progress, as the league as a whole progresses, and the games will seem a little more meaningful. Okay, what do they look like in clutch moments? You know what I mean? Things like that, where it doesn't seem that meaningful right now, but it's still really early in the process. So
yeah, they played Amen and Oscar specifically played in the Big Three, or not the Big Three. Jeez, I always get it mixed up. The TBT last year covered that game after it happened, and it was really neat to see them play against quote unquote grown men, even though a lot of them were, guys that played at I think they played against the Creighton team that ended up making the championship or win it, the TBT. But those Creighton guys are no slouches, even though they're in their 30s and 40s, so that's a little bit different, right? But it's good to see them in other environments, which is why hopefully we get a chance. Maybe there's some kind of tournament play later in the year that I'm not aware of right now, or maybe it hasn't happened or been scheduled yet. I just hope I get to see one more professional environment for them that's not overtime elite.
For sure.
I want to ask one more question before we get into the 20s and 40s, where I think the draft is a lot more fun, because I think this draft, I haven't hidden this. This is something I've said now for a while, but I don't think this draft is as good as people are saying it is. So I think that is not a discredit to anybody at the top. It's just, I think for me, there are less guys I'm in love with, which I think in a normal draft is like the whole first round. I'm like, okay, I like every guy in the first round. That's why they're there. I was telling Chuck from Chuck and Darts a few weeks ago. I said, I really like the top 16 I have written down at the time. And he asked a great question. He goes, well, who's 17? And then so we talked about like the next teardrop for that. And we'll talk about that in a second. But anybody else in the top 5 or 10, obviously the Hornets could get anywhere in that range, right? They can obviously, Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, Kem Whitmore, I already, like I said, we plucked him off there. Jarris, we talked about, Amen, Osar, Brandon Miller, really the guys that are left there that are kind of consensus. They're probably going to end up being top 10 picks. You mentioned Keontae George already. Is there anybody, and G.G. Jackson was the other one I was getting at. I have some other guys valued a little bit higher than most, but anybody else in the top 10 that you maybe are just super sold on or super high on, not necessarily for the Hornets, but in this case, if they get anywhere, because the farthest they would fall is 5, if I'm remembering how that correctly works now. If they fall in that top 4 and they fall out, they would only fall to 5. I think it's 5 or 6, but either way, anybody else in that top 10 that you're just like, you'd be over the moon if they got, outside of the ones I've already named? Is there somebody that you're like, if you posted a big board tomorrow, if there's somebody in the top 10 that we would be like, wow, okay? If no, then we're good. Keontae George is it. We can move on.
Yeah, I mean, it would probably be Keontae George. And this is very Hornets related, like the reason, but I still actually like Grady Dick. I know he's more of like a 13, 14 type guy. But
if he was in last year's draft where you had 5 picks in the 14s, it felt like you had 5 first-round picks that were in like the 13, 14 range. If you had that, then that would be perfect. Yeah,
I like him just because it's more so the shooting. Like I said, he can shoot. That's the one thing he can do is shoot. And then other guys, there's guys I like, they just don't fit. But Jet Howard, I like how he's
nice. Okay,
I just like how he's came a long way.
Yeah.
I remember at the beginning of the season, people are like, "Oh, it's just because of his dad," and it's like, no, he's actually good.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually surprised it took this long for him to go up. But I think a lot of people like to write him off. Bryce Sensabaugh is another one who I really, really like. I really, really like his game. And I remember at the beginning of the year, I was like, why is this guy like late first round or early second in some cases? It didn't make any sense. So now I'm glad that he's going up there. He's still not a top 10 guy, but he's just guys in that little range.
Well, that's
Anthony
perfect.
Black is another one too that I actually like.
Nice.
I just like that I like he can do a lot. I also like he's able to run an offense at such a young age, but he seems like he knows what he's doing. He still makes like young player mistakes, young guard mistakes, but you can tell he sees the game differently. I remember at the beginning of the year I was watching him in the tournament in the Maui Invitational, I believe, and there was just a lot of plays he was just making that it's like, wow, this guy's really making NBA level plays, and we're at that point, what, 5-6 games into the season.
So, he was being forced to score too. People saw the scoring output and they didn't understand that like he doesn't want, and he was dropping 25 2 games in a row, and it's like,
and he doesn't even want to. Like that's not his game at all. If you watched him in high school, that was not his game. He was just bodying up people on defense and just doing some passes on, like that was his game. But he was just so efficient at it. That's why I think he got the hype he did. But he did not want to. He's not
adaptability.
Super
adaptability. That was a really good segue, but not Anthony Black. Grady Dick was what I was going to say, and Bryce Sensabaugh. Those were great segues because you do have the 29th overall pick, unless it's moved, right? That's obviously the beauty of the lottery is after 14 picks, those picks are set unless they are moved, right? So no stress there, right? You just got to worry about where that one fun one in envelope happens in April, so or May, I guess, whenever they moved it this year. But at the end of the day, I do like a lot of the things with Anthony Black. I think there's a good conversation there. There's a really cool rabbit hole about how you mentioned the way those Maui games went. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I will say he was basically forced to score in those positions. He put up the stats that you would expect him to at that point. So the 29th overall pick, you have obviously this is where Subjectiveville USA starts happening, right? This is where and I'm just going to give you context and we can kind of play with it. Guys that I have anywhere in the 25 to 35 range right now as of February 1st, because I only do this once a month. I have Bryce Sensabaugh at 25, which is why I wanted to bring this up. So I'm glad you said it. So I think he's got that, and I think at this point people are having fun with the lottery where lottery means anybody from 25 to 14 because any of those guys can be lottery picks, right? So Bryce Sensabaugh 25, Jalen Clark 26, Coleman Hawkins of Illinois 27, Trace Jackson Davis 28, Rand Rupert 29, Azuolas Tubelis, a guy that I am 100% higher on the consensus, and I'm willing to admit that. Kalel Ware, Noah Clowney, Ricky Council, Jalen Slauson, and Colby Jones. So do not pick any of those guys unless you want to. But just giving you a context of where I have some guys. So if you bring somebody up, we'll discuss it. I want you to say doesn't have. I don't honestly. I would love it if it'd be somebody other than those 5 or 10. But who would be the Darian Thomas, Mitch Kupchak perfect pick at 29 if you had the choice?
I'm looking at who you got on here.
I hope you pick someone else. That's why I was like, I'm just giving you context in case you say it. So when I tell you that I have that guy at 48, you're like, okay, let's discuss this. So who would the whole point is who would you pick in this position because you are the GM now?
I'll give you one who you have earlier than the 25 to 35 range, but I would hope it's mainly I'm hoping this guy would fall. Okay, and that's Deron Holmes.
Okay, I
really like Deron Holmes, and you can also mention a lot of things that we talked about with Jarris Walker. You can kind of see in Deron Holmes in a way. I actually really like his game. I think he'll be a good fit for the Hornets. I think he's a really good player, and I think that a lot of people don't. I don't know. I can't say it's because he went to Dayton because Dayton outside of like NBA talent has been a good team. So there's not really much you can say about that. He's definitely not the defensive player that Jarris Walker is, but he has the build to be a better defensive player. And and especially with this kind of range right here in this area of the draft, that's what you're drafting on. You're drafting on just potential, but he's shown that he can do a lot. He's averaging 2 blocks a game, 8 rebounds, 17.7 points a game. He's a really good player in my opinion. He also is in that weird where he's not a wing, but he's also not a big man role. But I also would like to have maybe someone that isn't that's more so of a guard because I think the Hornets need that, especially if we're just basing off the Hornets getting Brandon Miller earlier. So another one I would do, and I'm glad you put this because I haven't seen him enough, but Jalen Hood-Schifino, I really like his game. I wasn't actually familiar with him until UNC went to Indiana and played him and lost. I was very sad about that, but he was really good that game. He played very well, and I've just been following closely ever since, and I really like his game. He's someone that I could see kind of fit next to LaMelo. He does need the ball. That's kind of his game, but I feel like it's not – I feel like he can play without the ball because they do have another guard there. His name is
Xavier Johnson.
Funnel.
He just went down though, so he's kind of Hood-Schifino's forced into a lead guard role, unfortunately.
Right.
Some would say that's a better thing, and I would be one of those. Some
Yeah.
I do think that was better for JHS, but nothing. Prayers to Xavier Johnson if he comes back for their tournament run. But my point is, I think he was thrusted into a role that he absolutely needed to be in, because if that kid's on any other team that puts him in any other better position, he's going to be, considered in the lottery faster than he was this year. 100%. And the point that I like that you made about the fit with LaMelo, or fit in general as a second guard, is that it really does depend on how much you believe in the shot. I am less of a believer than most, but I want to be clear that he can be other things than be a lead guard. I want him to be a lead guard in the NBA. I want him to be Anthony Black. I want him to be that type of player. However, if he gets drafted in that 20-something range, you could go anywhere at that point. You could go to Denver, and then you're, at that point, you have no idea what you're going to get with the ball because you have Jokic. But you could go somewhere like that, and I think he'd be okay still. I think he's going to have to be really, really impactful in other ways, but he's so good with the ball in his hands, which is why I do have him labeled as a reliable combo guard, but every time I watch him, I go, well, he controls the tempo so well as a lead guard that why would I want him to be a combo guard? So I'm kind of almost contradicting myself. I love that you brought him up. He was one of the 3 players I used in the graphic for the big board for the riser faller.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I really do. I didn't have him I only did a top 30 January 1st, so the last 30 days I've sat down and really grinded out the second round and tried to get that right, but or at least get that down on paper. So he would have probably been just outside of the first round at the time. I didn't have him ranked, obviously, because I didn't do that publicly. But long story short, I do really like that you brought him up, because I think he's going to get some weird buzz, no pun intended, in that late lottery range, and I think it's deserved. But I think I'm seeing a really big variance for him, where there's a lot of people I trust that are like, man, there's too many things, and I have him in the 30s, and I'm like, 30s?
I think he's better. I think he's better than that. I think he's shown
too.
that he can be better than that. He will be better than that. I'm not now. The lottery, I could see if people say that's too rich for my blood. I get it.
The game they just had against Maryland, though, he was horrible. Most of that team was horrible, but it was that was kind of one of those games where you kind of are going to take out. If you're taking out the worst game and you're taking out the best game, that's a really bad game. You had to really throw that one out. I mean, I think he had 2 points. He was 1 for 14 from the field. I mean, it was bad. So really I'm not discrediting him in any way. I just think there's a lot of things that he needs to figure out when he doesn't have the ball.
Right. But I think that specifically for the Hornets, I just feel like that's why he would be such a good pickup, is because there are times LaMelo, we all know, is really bad at getting into foul trouble. This is your guy you go to, as opposed to Terry Rozier, who can play make. He can be a lead guard. That's not what he does, though. That's not what he's good at. Last year, that was one of the better Terry Rozier seasons. And if you look at the numbers, he was strictly off the ball guard. He was a catch and shoot guy mainly, if you look at the statistics. And so that's not what he needs to be in. We don't have a true backup, because then you put in Dennis Smith Jr., who can't score, and then you got Teo Maldon, who's on I love Dennis Smith Jr., but he can't score. Good defender, can't score. And then Teo Maldon's on a 2-way. So those are things you got to think about. Who is that guy? You wouldn't want your guy to be behind LaMelo to be another starter, but we know that LaMelo gets in that foul trouble. What do you do to compensate for that? Get a guy that can actually run the
I love that. I love that way I hadn't try to figure out a way to articulate my own words. Whenever you initially pitched him, I was like, I think he'd fit a lot more places. But then when you put it like that, obviously that is taking into consideration. You don't think LaMelo is just going to turn into this All-NBA defender tomorrow. He's not. He's going to take some time. That was I think I had messaged you that whenever we were talking about draft chat and trying to get something lined up for Trivia Showdown, and I said, I went to that Nuggets game on the 28th last year, and I just couldn't believe, I haven't seen him in person much. I think that was the second time or first time. Defensively, I don't think he's bad, but my God, I would look up and the guy would be 15 feet past him already, and trying to
he's very instinctual.
Yeah, I'm good grief. I don't know.
One thing I say that makes people mad, because anytime you say anything bad about LaMelo, it's whatever. But
you have to be constructive. It's okay.
He's very instinctive. He knows what he needs to do. He's not
doing it.
I wouldn't say he doesn't do it, because that sounds like he's choosing not to. I don't think he understands exactly how to position himself. I think he understands what to do. I think he's very good at like mid dribble, so he'll take the ball from somebody. If he plays the passing lanes very well, but I don't think he quite knows how to position himself. He knows he needs to position himself. He knows that okay, I probably should turn this way, but he just I think I don't know if he's second guessing himself, but he does it a little late, and then at that point he's reaching, and then also he doesn't run back when people get past him. So these are things that kind of where I got at the guy like JHS, I think it would help. He's not no all-time defender either, but I feel like he's a little more an actual defender as opposed to an instinctual defender where he just plays defense. He doesn't really think too much about it. He's just his job is I'm gonna try to stay in front of this guy as best as I can. And I don't think LaMelo does that. I think he's how can I make the big play? And a lot of times he does, he's not by locking up somebody, but it's by, tipping the ball or something. But I think JHS is a better, okay, at least I just need to stay in front of the guy. And that's what I'm trying to do. LaMelo is not more so that way. So that's kind of how I feel about that.
I'm going to give you 3 names that aren't guards that we're going to play around with for a minute before we get into the 40s for the sake of time. I'm going to give you Coleman Hawkins, Trace Jackson Davis, and Noah Clowney. 3 guys that I think would fit the Hornets perfectly from day one.
Right.
I have them 27, 28, and 32. So really just the same place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which of those 3 right now would you draft? I think in that position at 29, I think you're better off with a big like that can stretch the floor. I think you're better off with those guys than you might be with a Jalen Hood-Schifino, who's probably gone at that point.
I'm going Noah Clowney.
I like it. That's what I thought you would do.
I
like
really, really like Noah Clowney. I feel like he doesn't because of Brandon Miller. He doesn't get like the love he deserves. Oh, I feel like he's getting it now.
27% from 3 doesn't. 27% from 3 doesn't help his case. But I'm with you. Yes,
right.
Can shoot, but it hasn't happened yet, which is why I think his potential is really untapped.
Yeah, and then he can be a lob threat. He's a pretty good defender in my opinion. I think that in a way, I wouldn't say he's the complete defensive anchor, but I mean he kind of plays that role.
He is
for the most part. So I really like his game. I do think sometimes he can disappear. As far as maybe not disappear, but just get lost in the shuffle. He doesn't know how to kind of exert himself onto the court, exert himself into the game. I think he lets the game come to him. But if you get in a guy like that, especially if you're the Hornets, you kind of want a guy that makes his presence known on the court a little more often, or just knows kind of when to turn it on. I think he naturally is just able to like get blocks and rebounds and things like that. That's off pure talent. But I feel like I wouldn't say struggle, but it's just he's having a hard time to find, okay, this is my time where I need to come up with the big play or something like that. The game naturally comes to him. But sometimes you want guys to kind of take that initiative, and I don't think he does. But he also doesn't have to. That team's really good, very well coached, so he doesn't have to. That's one of the things we were kind of talking about earlier, is that college is a weird thing where sometimes you never had to do that in college, So that's something I would want to see from him, but I don't really think that's a knock on him. Coleman Hawkins actually is someone I'm not that high on. I'm really not that high on Coleman Hawkins. I don't really know why. It's just when I watch him, nothing sticks. Now, I don't think he's going to be a bad player. I think he obviously should be. I think he deserves a first round pick. It's just nothing sticks out to me where it's like I gotta have that guy. Or if someone drafts him, now I say that every year about a lot of different players. But if someone drafts him, I don't think there's going to be a team where I'm like, oh wow, they really got somebody there. But that could change, based on the team that drafts him. So like Christian Braun from for the Nuggets, I really didn't have too much feeling about him either or, but when he got drafted by the Nuggets, I was like, that's actually a really good pickup for them. And then now we're hearing news that they're preferring him over Bones. Now I think we're hearing that more so they're saying that it's more of a off the court issue with Bones than on, but still
contractually too, they don't want to pay him long term
for sure.
Sucks.
So yeah, it does. I really like Bones, but yeah, it's just so I say that every year. So Coleman Hawkins would be a guy that if he goes to the right team, it could change my mind. And then who was the third one? I forgot. It was Tyrese.
TJD. Trace Jackson Davis. TJD.
I like him. I think that in the game against North Carolina, he played very well. They couldn't really stop him. And I think that in other games I've seen, he's played pretty decent. But he's also someone. Actually, I'd say I'm higher on him than Coleman Hawkins. But
as most people probably are. I'm taking into consideration that there are things that he's just not allowed to. You mentioned the archaic offenses of college basketball earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Woodson, even though he's been there 2-3 years, doesn't matter. Indiana's offense has been ugly and old for 15, 20 years. Doesn't matter
right.
who's there. Tom Crean doesn't matter. Trace Jackson Davis, there are things that I like about him that Coleman Hawkins is doing better, i.e. shooting the ball. Obviously, you're not going to get much better of a rebounder in the country other than Trace Jackson Davis. I don't think either of them are great pick and roll guys with the ball in their hands or without the ball in their hands, which is why Coleman Hawkins I don't think is a perfect fit for the Hornets because of I think he needs to be effective and utilize the pick and roll properly when you have such a good passer in LaMelo. I don't think any of those guys are bad choices. I think you were right in saying out front, though. I think Clowney's the best option, and I just want to be clear that Coleman Hawkins, I'm with you. I have him at 27, and I still feel the same way. I'm like, okay, he's done. All right, this game he's done that one thing that I was okay. He's not doing that mistake this time. And he's not I feel like I'm nitpicking him, and I do feel like I have him higher than most, and we don't know if Trace Jackson Davis can shoot. I can watch him in warm-ups all the time. I see videos from Indiana all the time. He's putting up 6, 7, 8, 10 threes in a row in practice or in warm-ups, and I'm like, let him shoot the ball. They are missing their lead guard. Let him be more fun. Pass out of the post. Shoot better. I don't know. That was a small rant. But finish your point about Trace Jackson Davis.
Oh, I mean, no, I agree. That he's one where I see the talent. It's just he doesn't show it. He doesn't get the opportunity to show it a lot. And it's weird. Another thing about college basketball is that this is, I guess, maybe off topic, but so many teams are in the tournament, right? So everybody's thinking, okay, we need to make the tournament. That's like your goal is to make the tournament, and then you figure out the rest later. I feel like that's what stops a lot of players, a lot of coaches from having players do certain things. Is that we're too busy trying to worry about making it into the tournament. And Indiana, this is a year for them to actually do something in the tournament. They're a pretty good team. But it's just, I feel like that holds them back. And, in the NBA, it's a little different. You got 30 teams, 16 teams make it. So 14 teams know really pretty quickly. Well, I guess the play in, but 14 teams usually know, like,
I know what you mean.
All right, our season's over. Let's just let these guys play. So in college, that threshold is much deeper into the season. So they're just you should win every game, but it's just they try to, okay, this is what works. This is what we practice all summer. This is what we're going to do. I feel like in college basketball, they're so against adjustment. And that's why sometimes players develop jump shots and we never even know until they make it to the NBA or maybe even summer league. Because everybody's so into like, this is what we did all year. Like Purdue, that's a team. I actually really like Purdue, like as far as like college basketball goes. Zach Edey, I think, can actually be in the NBA. I don't know what his role will be, but I think he does have value in the NBA. But anyway, that's a team where if you watch them play, they're a different team almost every game. Whoever they're playing, they try to stop that team's strengths. Whatever team, they're a very super well-coached team. A lot of teams don't take that approach. This is what we've been doing since day one. We're going to continue to do it. So a lot of players, I think, fall victim to that, in my opinion.
I like so we can get to the 50s and 40s picks here. So I like the point about like you basically used the Indiana example, but I like the point about how sometimes like making the tournament, that's the focus, not getting to see guys develop. It's almost like we should hold ourselves accountable in this conversation, how we literally were like, you know what? I don't know if we like overtime elite in the G League, but then it's like they don't have that problem, right? They have the opportunity to fully develop, which is why I think the G League is so beautiful, which is why I think we're seeing these Leonard Miller last year not be really good and all of a sudden he's starting to look good again. So two-way street, I think that conversation is honestly a whole podcast by itself of like comparing the three and figuring out whatever, right? There's a big deep dive there. But one more name I'll throw at you in the 29s that I want you to explore if you haven't is how much, obviously he just got back from an injury in the NBL, but how much Ryan Rupert's film have you been watching?
I watched a lot early. I have not watched a lot recently.
For what the Hornets need and want, I'm in.
Yeah, no, that 100% true. Like, I like what he does. I think I want to say his mom liked my tweet, or maybe his sister. I was saying something good about him, and the only reason it stuck out is because it said Rupert, and I was like, well, it's like a cousin or something at least. And then I looked, and then she was like, mother of two. It was definitely his mom. She was like mother of two beautiful children, and it was him and his sister. But I like his game. I think that he's and it's really tough. I'm actually really biased towards foreign players because I just love how they play. but sometimes it doesn't translate to the NBA with all of the athleticism. But I just like how a lot of foreign players just handle themselves on the court. They just know what they need to do. I like how mental the game is for them, and he's one of those guys. His shot does need to come, it needs to come a long way. But what I do like about him, and I'm glad you mentioned him for the Charlotte Hornets, is that he's a wing, and that's something that I've really been struggling to find for the Hornets as we've been talking about the draft and the picks and whatnot. I've really been struggling to find like that wing because like let's just throw in Bryce Sensabaugh. He's 6'6", should be a wing, but he really almost reminds me of like, this is very vague, but he really reminds me almost not LaMelo, Carmelo when he was with the Knicks, like that power forward type. Oh, I'm going to do spin around jumpers and things like that. I'm not really a wing, but I could be. So that's what Bryce, even though he's, a lot shorter than you would want him to be, considering to put him in that position, but he's not really a wing. Ryan Rupert is a definite wing. He's also a guy that can handle the ball. So if we're not getting JHS, as you mentioned, because he could be gone, Ryan Rupert will be another one that you could have the ball and handle the ball. He's not going to be, this amazing lead guard, but it's sufficient enough. And also, you'd be more willing to have someone like him come off the bench, especially in the early year. He's not a guy that I feel like commands starter minutes. So that would be a really good guy to come off the bench, that he can be your kind of guard to kind of hold it down for a little bit. But he also, if you need him to be your wing defender. And that's which we don't have much of in Charlotte. So.
Yeah, I think he'll be fun to kind of monitor this clip, because what we can do is realize that he's probably going to have a good season to end the NBL season here, and then he's probably going to get considered in that late lottery range. So it's, that might have been completely precarious and it won't matter in 3 months, but it's okay. I think he is good, and if he's there, you absolutely should take him. So for the sake of time and for the sake of there's so many guys we could talk about in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s, you guys have 46, 49, and 52. We could rapid fire these a little bit. Who would you... since they're all basically the same pick in that range,
right?
Who is 3 guys at that point? You can call them sleepers if you would like. At that point, you can call them just your guys, whatever. At that point, who are 3 people you would take in those positions?
Trevon Brazile from Arkansas. I love him. He just
despite the injury, right? Despite the injury.
I mean, I would still take him. Who else?
For the sake of context, I have him at 49. So that's, I'm taking consideration a lot of things. He'd probably be late lottery, and you guys have the 49th pick. So perfect. I'm just giving you context for where
I'm
going
to go with another Arkansas player.
I love
it. I can't think of his name. Jordan Walsh. I really like Jordan. He offense leaves a lot to be desired. He's more of I'm just going to dunk. I'm going to bully. But then that's what he did in high school. Got to college. It's a little harder to bully some of these guys. So he struggled a little bit. But on defense, I forgot what game it was. But he locked somebody down. I wish I could remember. But he's a very good defender. He knows how to move his feet. He plays with intensity, and that's something that the Charlotte Hornets are desperately lacking, is just intensity from anybody. I think Dennis Smith Jr. was the only one who was providing that, and he got injured, and it kind of hasn't been the same for him since. But definitely, he just brings intensity into his game, period. So that's enough for me to want to draft him. I know that could be late for some people, because I know at the beginning of the season he was kind of seen as a first-round pick, but I think everybody at Arkansas was seen as a first-round pick at the beginning of the year because they were just so talented. And another one, I would go, let's say...
While you're thinking about it, I have Walsh just for fun. I have Walsh at 55. He was one of the biggest. He was the biggest faller. He was the biggest faller in the last 30 days.
Really?
Because a lot of things.
I believe it. I mean, I get it.
It's just frustrating because I want to see him come around faster, but it's just, I don't know. I have a whole thing I want to do on him soon, and I want to see how the next couple of months with Nick Smith not being there happens, and I'm wanting to see the offensive game kind of come together.
Yeah, that's another one that we haven't even mentioned, Nick Smith Jr. But
Hornets don't have a pick where I have him valued and where you probably have him valued now, so we'll see. I mean, 4 and then a big gap to 29. If we're talking mid lottery, that's a different story. But we'll see.
He didn't show much when he got to play. I mean, he was okay, but
he tweeted like 4 days ago, like, keep the same energy. This morning, actually, I think it was. He was like, keep the same energy whenever.
But it's like you'd work good, like I mean, I know he's good, but just like in the game, like it just. But anyway, let's go with Coleman Hawkins' teammate, Terrence Shannon Jr.
Oh my God, I thought you were about to say Coleman Hawkins. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Hold on,
no.
40 spots lower. No, I love it. Okay. Oh, tell me why. This is the first time I've talked about him publicly, so tell me why I would take Terrence Shannon. Yeah, the inconsistencies.
He started off strong. Very inconsistent. He's very inconsistent.
Yes. If you
but at that range,
pull
that's
up
what
a dictionary
you're taking
right now, and you look up the word inconsistency, the old joke is like his photo would be right there. And I just don't know what NBA team's going to give him that kind of leash, especially drafted in that range. And I'm okay with some of the things that he brings offensively, but I think at his age and his development cycle, I don't know what I'm getting other than a guy that's going to be offensively impactful without the ball, which is not easy to do in the NBA. It's different when you're the second best player or best player on a college team. True. There's a big jump. I think he's one of those guys that gets a big reality check in the NBA. Go ahead. I'd like to hear more positive. I'd like to hear something nicer about him. Sorry.
Well, it's a lot of it is just like what he could do offensively. Like you said, it's very one dimensional. But I feel like the Hornets need it. This is more so like just basing it off what's on the roster. You would have to assume Kelly Oubre's not there. Not going to be there. Gordon Hayward is just he'll be on a 1 year. He's going to be there, but he's going to have 1 year left. You don't really have anybody that could do what he does, even though as one dimensional as he is. There's not anyone else on the roster that can do it. We haven't seen enough of Bryce McGowan, even though I'm a big believer in Bryce McGowan. I have no idea what the heck is going on with James Bouknight, so can't even mention that. So it's just like that's why I picked him. Another guy who's actually extremely inconsistent is the guy from Creighton, Arthur Kaluma. He's extremely inconsistent, but he has he can do a lot. He's not one dimensional. Well, he plays one-dimensional, but his skill set isn't one-dimensional. So he does like the same thing over and over again. But I've seen him times where when he actually attacks the basket like he's supposed to, he's actually a pretty good finisher. A lot of times I see him, he settles, especially in the mid-range, especially in the three-point line.
Big time.
He settles a lot. I think he has times where he locks up, but he also has times where he just doesn't play defense. That's another thing you got to think about with him. But I'm willing to take that risk because he's shown that he can lock up. And his defensive lapses aren't that he doesn't know what he's doing. It's just I think he doesn't care, or that's not really what he wants to do. And that's as bad as that sounds. And it's like, oh, well, you could draft a lot of guys who care, because I'm really big into that. That's like one of my biggest pet peeves with the Hornets is that a lot of times they just act like they don't want to play. But Arthur Kaluma, I feel like he's shown that he can do it if we get the right coach, because I don't think Steve Clifford's going to be there next year. But if we get the right coach, that I feel like is what's going to help propel him to be a better defender, because he's shown that he can do it. And then also the Hornets need a finisher. He's really good at finishing. They just got to get him out of settling. So I know it's a lot of kind of helping him get to a certain spot. And I mentioned earlier with Jarris Walker that the Hornets are not good at that. But at that range, you got to take what you can get. And then when he's on his game, a lot of people had him in the first round. So if you're getting him at 49, I think we said, or 48, somewhere around there,
yeah,
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. So those are just some guys that I guess I was cheating, because those are guys who probably were first round picks at the beginning of the year, and now they're like second round picks. But
that's okay.
They have the talent, right? But it's just it hadn't worked out for them. And then Creighton as a whole, their whole team, very talented team, just can't seem to put it together. So they were really good at the beginning of the season, fell off a cliff.
They were 0-6 without their big man Colt Brenner. So it was kind of like
he's good too.
Forcing Kaluma to do other things, and it didn't work. Funny you say Kaluma. I have him at 46. I have Shannon at 47. So literally the difference is the defensive ability. I'm with you there. There's a couple others that are fun in that range. Julian Strother obviously just had a 40-piece plus. I think it was 40-something for Gonzaga. I think there's a lot of versatile wing. It's just funny. I don't want to create this logjam for the Hornets. I don't want to sit here and be like I'd love if Derek Lively just falls that far, which will not happen.
Oh my God!
Now if he falls that far, now granted, 46 would be the lowest. I mean, God forbid, right? And then 49 to 52. Right. So at that point, you're just picking straws like you were with McGowan's. I like Julian Phillips there, but if you're trying to get a guy, like everyone knows every year someone's falling. Like it is what it is. Last year it was. I thought it was Bryce McGowan's. I'm with you. I was all in those same ranges. I had him as I think I finished the year with him at 27. So that was pretty high for where he should have ended up being drafted. The question I want to end with before we do, every guest gets to go out the door and say, this is, for context of when this was heard, obviously the date will be on the episode, right? Every pick gets to give their NBA title pick out of East and West, obviously to make it and win, and then national title pick. So before we do that, if you would like to share this now, this would be great. Assuming Victor happens and 100% is a generational prospect, and assuming Scoot Henderson is somewhat of the same thing. He's the best guard prospect I've ever seen since John Wall. I got to watch John Wall live because he's from Raleigh, which is really cool. So just throwing that out there with Scoot. If those two work out like they're just probably going to do, Who is your guy that you are 100% taking to the grave that will work out in the NBA in this class? If you would like to put that out there now.
Oh, this is fun. I don't think I've ever done this. Give me
To give you
that I
context,
know that's gonna be good.
every year everyone has a guy. They might not just say it. Last year I was very clear with you. Mark Williams was my guy. He's going to work out. I'm not saying he's NBA star. How you interpret this question is completely up to you. I think Mark Williams is going to play in the NBA for many years because he's a good player. Obviously, he's not going to be a star. So but yes, that is my context of last year's guy. Jonathan Kuminga was my guy the year before that. I am not out. I think he's going to turn out well. Who is this year's Darian Thomas's guy that will 100% you'll go to bat for and he will work out no matter what happens to him?
Who am I going to bat for? It's got to be Cam Whitmore. I think it's really got to – I'm looking. It's got to be Cam Whitmore.
I like it.
Cam Whitmore, what I liked about him and what I knew that, like, one, when he played for, like, I think it was, like, the under-18 USA team, he just dogged everybody, like 3 points. Because the thing was he can't shoot. He's shooting over everybody. He doesn't play defense, locking up players. Now, granted, it's other, places, but still. And then what I like about him also is that injured, and we know that like injuries in college really play like a huge part in how a lot of players just approach the season. Like, for example, what was it? Michael Porter Jr., his injury, granted, he was like a chronic injury, but he couldn't come back. Everybody was just basing off what they, pictured him to be. And I mean, he's still dealing with those injuries, but he's shown he's a really good player. Cam Whitmore came out the gate as if he was just never injured. And that's the type of mentality anybody would want, not just the Charlotte Hornets. He just came out as if he never was injured. He just came back and played like it was the first game of the season, and he continues to play that way. He plays with intensity. He plays quick. He plays fast. He's extremely talented. I know the shot does need to come around. I'm just because I did mention that earlier. He was shooting over people, but we know for some reason when players play like in little tournaments like that, they all of a sudden are a new player for some reason. But I feel like the shot will come around. I think he's just a smart player. Like I said, he plays with aggression, and also he doesn't shy for the moment. And I think that that's something that Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson do. I'm not saying he's on that tier; they're on separate tiers, but that mentality, obviously, it plays a part with a lot of good players in history, not just this draft class. So I really like Cam Whitmore and what he can do. I do want to see just what the ball handling, because I do want to see him be a little bit of a ball handler, especially considering he's going to play that wing. He's not that big man, pseudo big man like we were talking about earlier, like with Brandon Miller and stuff. He's literally more so of a wing. He's just that size of like a Brandon Miller. But I do want to see him get better at ball handling, get better at shooting, but just the tenacity he plays with and just his ability. You can see it as soon as you turn on the game, is that he's just going to be a special player. So that's the guy I will bat for. I don't care if it's year 10 in the league and he looks like Randy Foye of all people. I'm going to bat for Cam Whitmore and be like, one day he will be great, and I will always do that.
I love it. I love the passion. I could tell you actually thought that. It was a nice roller coaster. We ended up with, I don't care if he's Randy Foye. Shout out Randy Foye. But my thing with Cam Whitmore, and we can get closed up here, is I think he's Paul George waiting to happen. All of the same things you told me was all the same question marks people had about Paul George. The dribbling, is it going to come around? Obviously, he ended up being a guy with really good touch. Obviously, a lot of injuries ended up rattling his explosive ability, which came up more in college. Same thing. I'm just seeing this perfectly carved path for Paul George, which means he's probably not going to be Paul George. But the point is he's like perfectly falling into that, and I'm excited to see how that develops, which is every reason why I have him at number 3. No context whatsoever, because it makes it more fun when I clip it and send it to you in 3 months. Eastern Conference champion, obviously the guy that's making the finals in the East, or team that's making the finals in the West, who wins it, and then national title pick, and then we'll get out of here. Plug after that.
Okay, so on the East, it hurts me to say this because I don't like any teams from this city, but the Boston Celtics, I think they're probably going to come out the East. I don't like any Boston team. One, I'm a Yankee fan, so the Red Sox are out. 2, I never liked Tom Brady. I will always, now that he's retired, I can say that he's literally the best quarterback ever. Just never liked him. But I can say that he's the best quarterback ever now that he's gone. But yeah, I think Boston's they're so talented. I feel like they're still hungry for more players. You got Malcolm Brogdon, you got Marcus Smart, you got all these guys. I don't have to list the roster, but I feel like they're still out there looking. That's the sign of a good team. You see how dominant your team is, and they're still like, what can we do to get better? Because they're thinking Boston is in a position where we're thinking 9, 10 guys off the bench. We're not thinking who's our 6th man, who's our 7th man. So sign of a good team. The West is a little more tricky. it's actually a lot more trickier. For the West, I don't really know. It's hard to believe in the Grizzlies as far as winning the West. It's tough, like talent wise, but just like, are they ready? That's kind of where, because we've seen that like they get shaken up really easily. Like I know people joke, but after that, John Morant was, I'm not worried about anybody in the West. They lost like every game they played against Western opponents. So, and that might not be true now, but at that time when I saw it, so out the West, dude, it's really hard to bet against the Warriors. It we're gonna go Warriors. It's one of those things, as I mentioned, Tom Brady, where you bet against him. That's when he does his best. That's what I'm gonna just say the Warriors for just the sake of this. Would just, of course, this is the perfect season for the Warriors to win. They don't look like they're winning, but then they turn it up in the playoffs and they end up winning. And I think that's the best bet. I think that's my best bet. I would really like for it to be Denver. Their bench scares me. When Jokic is not on the floor, it's terrible. It's horrendous. So that worries me. But like just their starters, if they can stay healthy, it's hard to stop them with that offensive firepower they have. So I would like for it to be Denver, but I think I'm going Warriors.
Okay. Who wins national title pick? And go ahead and plug away.
Boston. I think Boston's going to win it this time. I know I said you can't bet against the Warriors, but Boston, they just look hungry. I guess the one thing you would have to worry about is for a young team like that, even though they do have their share of veterans, can they keep that hunger all the way through? So far, they've been doing a good job, but we know All-Star break plays a part in that. Trade deadline plays a part in that. Going against the first round against an easy opponent plays a part in that, where you go in with so much momentum and then you play someone that you sweep in 4 games. How do you keep that intensity all the way through? That's something you have to concern about them, but I think they'll do it. They seem like they're hungry. And so national championship for the college. Let's see. Oh, can I want to go Houston. I really like
Nice.
Houston. I like how they play. Their coach does a really good job of just making sure those guys show up with their lunch pail, ready to play ball. I think I'm gonna go Houston. I know it's not the best pick. I know there's other teams like Purdue is an easy pick to make, but I just like Houston. I like they just have a lot of players that can do a lot of different things, and that's kind of what you need, especially when the lineup shortened, because the lineups same way in the NBA and college, the lineup shortened when they get to the tournament. But I think all those guys they're hungry and they want to win. I mean that's why you have guys like Marcus Sasser, and then the other guard I can't remember his name, but he's an excellent defensive guard. He's short. I feel like that's the only reason he's not really getting that much draft talk. Him too, yeah. But the other one I can't remember his name. I really wish I could remember. Oh man, it's gonna bother me because I really like this guy. But he's an excellent guard. He's just short. He plays amazing defense. He's just 6'1", so you really can't. And he's not that good offensively, so that hurts him. But Terrence is another good one to come off the bench. I mean, he's the guy that's a little inconsistent, but he's shown that he can do it all. He can score in bunches when given an opportunity. He can play pretty good defense. And then you have Jarris Walker as well that we mentioned earlier. So I think I'm going to Houston.
Yeah,
this is the year for them after losing.
It's in their city, and if the Super Bowl the last 2 years have taught us anything, the Bucks made the Super Bowl in 2020. It was their home stadium. The Rams made the Super Bowl in 2021. It's their home stadium. Why not have the Final Four in Houston, and Houston makes it? I'm also going to be there, so I kind of want to see them there. So I'm going to go I always throw it out there, too, at the end just to make sure my predictions are consistent. As of right now, it has not changed for a month. I have Denver, Boston winning, and I have Houston winning the national title as well. Okay. All of your stuff will be linked below as well, but go ahead and let listeners know where they can find you, subscribe, all that stuff. It'll also, Twitter will be on the screen as well as everything in the description below. Plug away.
First of all, I want to say thank you for just having me. I love talking basketball with you. It's nice to talk about college basketball with a lot of people. Nice. A lot of my friends have no interest in college basketball whatsoever, so it's good to have this conversation with you. I know, right? You're missing out. But you can find me on Trust the Buzz. On YouTube. I used to make daily videos, but I'm moving, so it's a little hard. But I make a lot of videos about the Charlotte Hornets. I'll talk about everything from trades and then just to my opinions on how the team's playing. Also, you can find me at Draft Nerds on YouTube. Basically, I just talk about the NBA draft. I talk about also college basketball teams. I know a lot of people they don't like when just you pick players on their team and don't talk about the team. So I try to talk about the teams as well. Also, you can find me at Truz Buzz on Twitter. I got that. I just talk about the Charlotte Hornets. I talk about anything that I'm really interested in, but I like to talk about the Charlotte Hornets, talk about the direction they're going, and I think that's it. I would say plug my Draft Nerds Twitter, but I don't tweet on it enough. I end up just using my main account, so then it's like, what is this for? But I'll try to use it more. So if you want to follow me on that, it's NBA Draft Nerds on Twitter as well. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad just to be here and talk hoops.
Yeah, I'm glad we were actually able to talk basketball for once, because last time it was trivia. So I'm really glad to have you back. Always welcome here. So thank you for the plugs. We'll go ahead and get closed up here. Don't forget to give all of his stuff a support below. Everything will be linked. Draft Nerds, Trust the Buzz, YouTube, all that stuff below. As well as don't forget 2 pointers on every major social media platform. W Energy, 10% off your order at wenergy.com or link in the description below. Takes you right to the site to buy. I think that's it. I always hate doing my generic intro or outro at the end, but this has been the 2 Pointers Podcast. On behalf of Darian, my wife did draw this photo, by the way.
Oh, I appreciate that.
We'll see you later.
I appreciate that.